All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Hello, everyone. I know. One of those wild weekends. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Hey, look, Trump finally got the military parade that he wanted. You know what I'm saying, everyone? Yeah, the first one was kind of a downer. So he sent in the big stuff for a big boom, which is really what he's all about, you know. Trump comes in hot. He doesn't really, not about subtle, you know. And so that was the military flex that he was looking for. So Donald Trump, our president, my Lord and Savior, has now thrust us into the heart of a conflict in the Middle East. Shades and echoes of the past. We will get into some of that. The ICE raids continue in America unabated, and it's increasingly hard to know whether you're being detained by ICE agents or just guys with a van and dark clothing. And some of them don't even bother with the dark clothing. I'm seeing stuff that is, it's clearly not official. These guys are just like militia. They're like posses going out there. So we'll sift through a lot of this with Gary Dietrich. In fact, some of you wrote me in emails about Gary and his last appearance and the political violence that has gripped America and is increasingly a part of the American landscape because it's the thing that scares legislators, scares judges, scares officials to the point that they don't stand up for what they believe anymore. They just kind of move along to get along, and we end up sleepwalking to some really nasty stuff. Political threats are real. We've seen the brutal assassinations of the people in Minnesota, legislator in Minnesota and her husband, and the attempted assassination of those two others. So I want to follow up because some of you emailed me about the conversation I had with Gary about that and the sort of the both sidesism that is popular, but in this case, your emails were saying not as applicable. So again, I want to park that to the side, but I did want to let you know we're doing that. Look, there's no getting around it. I want to get right into it. The fact that Donald Trump has put America in the Middle East in a big-footed way. There is no question but that this kind of attack can't be a one-off, meaning you can't go into a sovereign country, Iran is a sovereign nation, pull off a bombing like this, massive bombing, never before used were these bunker buster munitions, and fly back home and then tell Iran, and now we're all about diplomacy. I mean, you were all about diplomacy before you dropped these things. I thought we were just at the table. The absurdity of this is on display in a big way, but the danger is on display as well. So this is an extremely volatile situation, and we'll get into a lot of it in the minutes ahead, and I'd love to know your thoughts as well. But
watching the Sunday news shows, and they say, we're not at war with Iran, Mark. We're just at war with Iran's nuclear program.
Yes, I love that. I love that.
You know, we're not dropping bombs on Iran. We're just dropping bombs on the nukes. It's okay. It's all right.
Kim, how are you?
That's exactly it. Tony's here also. Thanks, Tony. Thank you, Tony. In fact, apropos of what Kim is saying, and apropos is a ding word. I do want to get right into it, so we will get right into it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
We're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program. Yeah, you just got to understand. You got to get a playbook, and then you'll understand the way it's actually working. Here is a supercut of J.D. Vance explaining what the situation really is.
At war with Iran, we're at war with Iran's nuclear program. And it was only when the president decided that the Iranians were not negotiating in good faith that he took this action. Yeah. He didn't take it lightly, but I actually think it provides an opportunity to reset this relationship, reset these negotiations. The Iranians are clearly not very good at war. Perhaps they should follow President Trump's lead and give peace a chance. If they're serious about it, I guarantee you the President of the United States is too. I certainly empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives. So this is not going to be some long, drawn-out thing. We've got in, we've done the job of setting their nuclear program back.
Well, we don't really know whether it'll be a long, drawn-out thing or not, do we, J.D. Vance? In fact, at this hour, the Iranians have done what they have to do. I mean, they can't just sit there and take it and go, okay, now we're going to go back to diplomacy. No. I mean, think about it. Politically, practically, it just doesn't make any sense. You must call out this violation, which they've done, call it out as a violation. Look, I'm an American. I'm on the American side. You know, I'm on Team America, but I'm also trying to call it objectively. And I'm just saying, as a practical matter, the Iranians have no choice but to hit back. Now, we can calculate whether or not that hit back will have a ripple effect that will extend months and years. I'd suggest it will. And I can give you all of the math on that and will in the hours and days to come. But in the short term, they're definitely going to strike back with what they've just done in the last half hour. Here it is.
Officials that we've been speaking to also say there is a bottleneck in its ability to fire back. But as James says, certainly places like Qatar are close enough for them to be able to fire like this, as is Iraq and as is Syria.
And Ian, we're now hearing from the Qatari Defense Ministry. They say that the Qatari air defenses successfully intercepted a missile attack targeting Al Udeid Air Base. Again, that is the largest U.S. air base in the Middle East. This news from Qatar comes after Iran had announced that it had launched that attack. I want to bring in our chief foreign affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz. Martha, you've spent a lot of time in this region. What do you make of this announcement now from the Qataris saying that they successfully intercepted this attack? And what does that mean for future retaliation?
Well, I've actually been inside that base there in Qatar, and the command center, the heart of air operations, really the heart of the region for the U.S., that air base. I am frankly not surprised they successfully intercepted the missile attack because they do have air defenses there in Qatar, in the air base there. And what I've heard from the Iranians is not a surprise at all. They are going to claim, as Ian and James have both said, they are going to claim that the missile attack was successful for their domestic audience. They have been crushed in the last few days by Israel, by the U.S., and they have to, in many ways, save face. And I think that's a real issue, Diane, too. What do they do now? How do they respond going forward? It's exactly right. In 2020, it was a calibrated attack on Iraq. Ian was in Iraq at the time. I was in Iran, reporting there behind enemy lines, essentially, when they launched those missiles toward the airbase in Iraq, and that did leave 100 troops with mild traumatic brain injury. But they didn't follow on with anything. I think one of the reasons they didn't follow on is because they accidentally shot down a Ukrainian commercial airliner, or they might have continued their attacks. But I also think we really have to watch Iran still. They still have capability, and they may have taken out 50% of missile launchers or a good deal of the ballistic missiles, but they still have capability. And if they keep those missiles coming, if they aim for Iraq, if they aim for Bahrain or other bases, they're bound to have some success. And just go back to what President Trump has said in the past. He has very much said that the U.S. would respond with strength. And the U.S. and Donald Trump are certainly in a position where they would have to follow through with that threat as well.
All right,
And
thank you, Tony. And that
Stephen Gagnon
sort of
into
sets the tone of the moment. So with the base, the American base really not having suffered any, I don't, Kim, based on what I'm seeing and, you know, early reports, it doesn't look like there was any real damage done, does it? I mean,
and would this be it? You know, a tit for tat?
It would not. That's, and no. By the way, that's not tit for tat. I mean, that's, you know, we just
went into their country,
annihilated, right, the Iran nuclear, I don't want to say the Iran nuclear facility, because the Iran nuclear facility, and this is the next thing, or one of the things I wanted to get to, the Iran nuclear facility was built underground, specifically to avoid the bunker buster bomb that's talked about. They're aware of the munitions that the Americans have, and they built a structure that was literally designed specifically to withstand the attack that we saw over the weekend. So you can have a parade and you can peacock all you want about what you've done and about how it was a successful mission. I get the fact that it was a successful mission from the standpoint of this marathon flight that has to be taken by these heroic pilots, and I will call them heroic pilots. I think they fly the missions that they're called upon to fly, and they successfully executed the mission. But you can't tell me that the mission was successful because you don't know. And
well, Trump says that it was obliterated. All the underground things were obliterated.
Yeah.
That the Iran's nuclear program is obliterated. The military is still trying to figure out if that's true.
I've never seen anything like the kind of obliteration that we
I've never seen anything like it.
All right. So can we now get to give me a little Caroline Leavitt, Tony. She was on Fox and Friends, and she's doing the peacocking that we're hearing from this administration right now. It was such a successful mission. Wow, this president has the courage to do something that no other president, a version of what J.D. Vance said when he said all the other presidents before him have been dumb. Finally, we have a president who is smart enough to understand the threat and to go for it. He literally said, all the other presidents before Trump were dumb. He used the word dumb. I mean, just, it was, the entire message around this thing is so much like a blunt instrument that there's just, it can't possibly all be true to the extreme that they've described. Now, again, there's nuance to the Middle East, and we'll get into some of that, but there's no nuance to the message coming out of the White House. Go ahead, Tony.
A Fox News alert, President Trump gathering his National Security Council at the White House today as he doubles down on his campaign promise, making the world a safer place after the epic takedown of Iran's major nuclear sites. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt joins us now. Caroline, I know the president seems very pleased by the results so far. What do we know about the effectiveness of the attack that's been relayed to you?
The president is pleased, the country is pleased, and frankly, Brian, the whole world should be pleased with the courageous action that President Trump and our United States military took on Saturday night. I want to thank, and the president wants to thank, the brave pilots who flew nearly 40 hours and more than 7,000 miles from the middle of America to the Middle East to conduct this highly successful and complex precision strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. This is an operation that presidents of the past have dreamed about, but no president had the guts to actually do it. But President Trump did, to take away this imminent threat, not just to the state of Israel, but to the United States and the rest of the world. So the country is a safer place today because of the president's bold action, and he has prevented a nuclear conflict. He has prevented a rogue radical regime from obtaining a nuclear bomb and threatening our people.
So I know the president's very decisive, but he also likes listening to all angles. And he's used to Democrats fighting against him
See that guy standing? Well,
Does he? Go ahead. We'll give you more here in a second. Does he really like listening to all angles? He likes to listen to all angles, maybe, and then he continues with the angle that he's on. Go ahead.
How much harder was the decision when you have people like Steve Bannon coming over for lunch saying don't do it, Marjorie Taylor Greene saying don't do it, and other voices like that? How did the president digest all that, knowing these people weren't necessarily against him, they're against pending action he more than likely was going to take?
One of the great things that makes President Trump a great leader is his ability to listen to people with different perspectives, but then ultimately make a decision based on his own instinct and the intelligence that he saw. And he saw, based on U.S. intelligence, that Iran is just weeks away from obtaining a nuclear weapon. And President Trump has been saying his entire life, not just as a presidential candidate or as president of the United States twice, but also as a private citizen, that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon. And that's something that leaders around this world and on both sides of the political aisle agree with. Again,
okay, let's just stop for a second. I just want to mention, because she invoked the mention of the intelligence community and the American intelligence community, she was talking about the fact that the American intelligence community was saying unequivocally that they were 2 weeks away from having a bomb. It's always 2 weeks with everything. But that isn't actually what the American intelligence community was saying, is it? In fact, Tulsi Gabbard was saying there's no evidence that they are close to a bomb. It's clear that after Trump heard that Tulsi Gabbard fell in line and she recanted that in effect. And Trump, said, I just don't believe her. In the same way he didn't believe that the Russians were involved in the election of 2016. The pushback, though, on the intelligence that was coming out of the American administration was profound. And I don't like that question, like, how did this is a propaganda machine, Fox and Friends. How did the president handle the fact that Steve Bannon was speaking with him and Marjorie Taylor Greene, they seem to oppose this. How did he handle it? I mean, come on. We saw how he handled it. But what I like about that question is it references a real thing, which is something we talked about last week, which is a split in MAGA land. There are those who very much view this as a violation of a promise you made, Mr. President. You promised we wouldn't get into any more of these things. In fact, you said we were going to get out of the things that we were already in. Instead, you're going in heavy. And you're even shining on American intelligence in the form of that which Tulsi Gabbard articulated, which shows that they are not that close to building a weapon. Now, see my first point, even if they were building a weapon, they're doing it well beneath the surface of where those bombs landed. And I understand those bombs can be immensely destructive, but and maybe they did destroy the entire thing. We don't know. There's a centrifuge down there. There's a bunch of uranium that they're trying to enrich. We did have modest inspections of the Iranian nuclear program, and we had more than modest inspections of the Iran nuclear program under the deal that Obama crafted. I mean, that wasn't a perfect deal, but that wasn't a bad deal. And you had a real-time monitoring of what the Iranians were doing. In fact, you were able, under that agreement, this is the one that Obama made, you were able to jump in, kind of with like a pop quiz kind of sense of what's going on with the Iranian nuclear program without warning. You were allowed to show up with inspectors. That was the agreement that Trump tore up because it had Obama's name on it. Now, as he tried to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, as I say, and you try to put that agreement that you've ripped up back into place, while he's at the negotiating table, he bombs the entire place. Now, the articulated vision that accompanies that bombing out of the administration, you've heard J.D. Vance say this, you've heard others, is now we've shown you we don't have the patience for your BS, Iran. We want to get you back to the table to make an agreement now. It's an aggressive kind of diplomacy, right? And the Iranians have the view, at least so they've talked about, essentially their position being, how can we trust the Americans? They're negotiating with us one day and they're bombing us the next. They tell us we have 2 weeks while the president considers what to do. And then the next day, America sends bombers over. I mean, this, again, is the Iranian position. So there will be Iran retaliation. There was Iran retaliation earlier today, as we say, just in the last hour on our base in Qatar. But beyond that, there'll be more. In fact, there's a lot of talk about these sleeper cells that are everywhere. I mean, again, you have to understand that the anxiety has been ratcheted up. And the latest on the sleeper cells is associated with a threat from the Iranians. This from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The threat of sleeper cells in the U.S. has, quote, never been higher. It was a memo sent by the CBP Commissioner Rodney Scott. Quote, thousands of Iranian nationals have been documented entering the United States illegally, and countless more were likely in the known and unknown gotaways, as they call them, people who they wanted and people who obviously they couldn't keep track of. Though we have not received any specific credible threats to share with you all, the threat of sleeper cells or sympathizers acting on their own or at the behest of Iran has never been higher. This again, according to this official memo, which urged personnel to remain, quote, vigilant. That's the sleeper cell situation. I think a bigger, more immediate threat, in addition to the bombings, which, I get it, that's performative on some level, and it's also something you have to do if you're Iran, as I was saying, right? You can't just let the Americans get away with this. And Iran leadership, has been taken out militarily. The Israelis took out a lot. This is another conversation. I'd love to have it in just a minute, which is about intelligence, because American intelligence in the region is nothing compared to the Israeli intelligence. It's remarkable what the Israelis have done from an intelligence perspective. I'm leaving aside policy. I'm leaving aside everything that's going on militarily. But what the elimination of Iran's top military leadership does is it shows you how good the Israeli intelligence is on a granular level to know the location of those military leaders so you are able to take them out. That's not something you can Google. You need the real operational strength that Israel has. So when we look at American intelligence, you keep hearing about American intelligence says this, American intelligence says that. I think Trump is working off Israeli intelligence, which is probably pretty good in terms of intelligence. I'm not sure that Israeli policy, in terms of pulling America into this thing, is anything but awful for the region and for the world. But the more immediate pushback that I think is quite possible is the Straits of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is this very narrow part of this region, and it's between Iran and Oman. I think we have a
heavy ship traffic there, right?
20% of the world's oil goes through there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think the strait itself is I want to say it's 21 miles, but the actual navigable part where you can actually work a huge tanker through, it's 2 miles wide. So it's very, very susceptible to the kind of interdiction that there might be with the Iranians. And so when it comes to China, and China is a huge customer for Iranian oil, a lot of their oil comes through that Strait of Hormuz. So again, this isn't a one-off that doesn't affect the rest of the world. Iran's most crucial oil customer may be affected by shutting down the strait.
Who
And
controls?
Marco Rubio knows this. He made this point. He said, I'm encouraging the Chinese government in Beijing to tell Iran not to close the strait.
Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, they're right there. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, they're right there. They can bomb, they can do any
Shut it
number
down.
of things
Yeah.
to
Blockade.
block that water. Mine it. If you look at the history of this strait, there have been all these things that have been done. Bombing, mining, blockades. So, again, the largest crude oil tankers come through this strait. And because the depth of the strait is such, you can get these huge tankers through. And that's not possible in a lot of other places. It's not like there are a lot of other alternatives or plan B options. So,
I was
and
reading
again-
that there's a
Yeah, I'm
thought
sorry.
this could affect the whole global economy.
Oh, most certainly. And again, I just because I just want to be clear about this. More than 80% of the oil and natural gas that is headed to Asia comes through the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, so that's a lot of energy that Asia is depending on that's very much affected by what goes on there. So this is a move that Iran could make easily. And Tony had I was just getting a feel for that. Tony, put it back up there again. This is the volume of petroleum transported through the strait in millions of barrels per day. That may not mean a lot to everybody, but essentially, I think the thing you need to keep in mind is that it's a tremendous piece of leverage that the Iranians may have and they may use. And Iranian leadership, as I say, the top dude, if I can call him that, is 84 years old, and he's seeing his country and his policies in ruins. Right? This is a country, and this is a fair point to make about Iran. This is a country that has been funding terrorism worldwide. They have surrogates in the region that are dangerous, that are bad actors, if you will, to use the phrase. You have the Houthis in Yemen, you had Hezbollah, you had Syria. These were all Iranian surrogates. So don't get me wrong, Iran bad in terms of their policy of underwriting terrorism. So a lot of that is in ruins. You've seen the degradation of Hezbollah, right? They're degraded to the point that they aren't necessarily even relevant in the conversation any longer. Syria has totally changed over. Assad is out, right? And even the Houthis have been weakened, although they're still there in Yemen. And so my point is simply that if you're the Iranian leader, you're looking around and you're saying, gosh, now the Americans have just set back our nuclear program. Maybe. We don't know that that's true. But in any case, he has less and less to lose. And that's something that we should keep in mind, because I think desperation produces any number of actions that could be very dangerous to the rest of the world. We just talked about the Strait of Hormuz, and we'll talk about some of the others, but that's some of what's going on. We'll get into this more and continue in our conversation with Gary Dietrich.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Do me a favor, smash the like button if you would. It helps us in the YouTube universe.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Smash it with your iron rod. Give us a thumbs up. We will be here for you and try to follow events as they happen minute to minute. We are a live show every day, Monday through Friday, 2 to 4 in the East, 11 to 1 in the West. And we are here in the United States of America. K. Nell with a $10 super chat. Been waiting all weekend for this show and palatable analysis. Thank you. Yes, my palatability has been, yes, it's really right. Mark, do you know how addicted I am to this show, says CBD. I keep refreshing for both weekend days, asking why isn't it here yet? Wow, isn't that great? We did drop a conversation over the weekend. We do and will continue to drop special interviews and conversations. Oftentimes, they don't have anything to do with politics, and we'll continue to do that on the weekend. So hit the notification bell, and you'll know whenever there is another one coming. If you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell. Chaplain Fred with a $20 super chat. Hi, Mark, Kim, and Albert. Just want to let you know that a friend is a bounty hunter and told me that he refused to be part of the crimes committed to innocent people. Trump might be walking up a giant, might be waking up, Trump might be waking up a giant that he was not expecting. I have some very strong feelings about what you're talking about, which is the roundup of so many people who essentially live productive lives, and not only productive for their own lives, but productive for the American economy and the American culture. And those people are being rounded up and deported in numbers and in ways that are unconscionable and un-American. And I'll talk more about that later in the show. Barry says, time to create a war tax on the billionaires of 85% before deductions and tax credits. Yeah, wow. What an idea. Thank you for that super chat. To have the billionaires fund this war. I promise that the billionaires will make money on this war, beyond the military-industrial complex. So, all right. Thank you for all of that. Let's get into a conversation with Gary Dietrich.
The Mark Thompson Show.
He joins us on Mondays. He is the political analyst for iHeart Radio and iHeart Media, also for the CBS television stations. Our former colleague at KGO Radio, the great Gary Dietrich. Everyone.
Hello, Mark.
Hello, sir.
Kudos. I never really thought so much about it as I am this morning, but the fact that you do this show live sets you apart from so many other podcasters, right? Who they might have taped their podcast a week ago, right? So the fact that you're in real time, I think should be seen as a major asset. I know it is by many in your audience.
Well, thank you. I mean, you always, even as we end a show, wish that you could just stay on all the time because things are breaking so very quickly. This was something that was not advertised by the president. In fact, he said, I'm going to take 2 weeks to think about this. And then, of course, the bombers were in the skies the following evening. Speak to me about the state of the state on all of this, and then we can follow up.
Yeah. Well, what Caroline Leavitt actually said from the press room, if you recall, was the specific language was the president said he will make a decision within 2 weeks. Now, that was, I mean, all the Trump people have now said that along with sending some of the B-2s, of course, westward across to Guam, both of those were major head fakes, and they were intended to be, to give the, and there's a third one, by the way, that's very interesting, and that is that neither Vance nor Trump were in Washington when this operation began. And that apparently was by design as well, so that there would be no sense in which there was a sense of urgency. You know, this wasn't launched from the Situation Room in real time. They really wanted to surprise the Iranians, I think particularly for the obvious reason, Mark, and that was to make sure that while the Iranian air defenses have been degraded significantly, and by all accounts, I mean, Israel has complete and total control of the skies over all of Iran now, not just Tehran westward, that, you know, Trump, the last thing he wanted was a Jimmy Carter-like event in Iran where somehow American servicemen went down in the deserts, right? He just did not want that to happen in any way, shape, or form. And that, of course, was successful.
So the military part of the mission, that is to say, what you described, the head fake, and then the immense number of munitions that were dropped on Iran, that was all, it seemed, carried off well. As you say, it wasn't a Jimmy Carter-esque, you know, trapped in the desert situation. The munitions seemed to hit their targets. We're hearing nothing but, you know, glowing reports from Donald Trump and his administration. There's a lot of peacocking going on. There's a lot of victory laps. I'd suggest that those are way, way early. And I'm leaving out what the Iranian response. I'm just talking about we don't really know what damage was done. What we do know is that that was a successful mission, as I say. Now let's talk about the rest of the mission. It doesn't seem as though this crew has planned for what they're going to do. Now, those plans might be in place, but I'd like to ask you, how you see this thing proceeding. It seems short-sighted to take a victory lap.
Oh, yeah. Well, you don't want to end up with George Bush on the aircraft carrier mission accomplished banner behind you, right? I mean, to be honest, the Trump people have not really postured this that way. They certainly have made much of the operational plan being successful. And by the way, parenthetically, but importantly, Mark, this was a plan that began in the Biden administration. There's reports now coming out that as much as a year ago, the operational plans for something like this, should it be required, were being put in place. So this was not something, and most military guys will tell you, this is something that took a long time to plan. You don't put this together in a week. I mean, you had 125 aircraft in the air, including, and this is remarkable when you think about it, dozens of refueling tankers, which means they all have to be fully loaded, all have to be pre-positioned, basically in different zones along the route and back, both for the fighter escorts as well as for the B-2s. I mean, it's quite a remarkable achievement. They talk about all the branches of the service, et cetera. But I think the thing going forward, Mark, to me is twofold. One is what's happening right now, which is the beginnings of some kind of Iranian military response. As you know, missiles being launched at the American Air Base in Qatar. Nothing apparently got through. The Qatar defenses brought those down. But the Trump people reportedly, they're ready for this. They knew it was going to happen. We don't know the scale and size and scope of that response, but there will be an Iranian response.
Go ahead.
Here's the three things, Mark, if I could real quick, that I'm concerned about. One is proxies, okay? You talked about the degradation of Hamas, for example, and Hezbollah, et cetera. Yes, but they still have operational capabilities, some of these folks. And I think if there's going to be something really disastrous, it may well come at the hands of one of those proxies, not from Iran itself, because they know what response a direct Iranian response would bring from the United States and others. Secondly, sleeper cells, right? This is starting to get more conversation. This is something I think people should be concerned about. In California and beyond, both state and local governments are well aware of this. As you probably know, Mark, major potential targets, even places like Disneyland, where you're going to have a large congregation of people are concerned about that. And the third and the final one, Mark, that honestly is most concerning to me, and you had none other than Putin mention this in the last 24 hours, and that is the potential and possibility of Iran saying, okay, we can't produce our own weapon, we're on the market for one. And would a North Korea or some other misled actor actually provide one? That is concerning.
I wonder, that lays it out so well, and that's kind of a great recapitulation of what's happened and where we are. I wonder if this crew, this administration, have gamed this out. They say that this is sort of a one-off. That was what Pete Hegseth said. It's kind of a one and done. But some of what you've talked about is going to necessitate a punch back. And even Trump and the administration have said, hey, don't hit back, because we can make this thing continue, even though it's not continuing now. It's not necessarily over.
Oh, yeah, if people have seen, if you've seen the maps of the assets that we now have positioned in that region, it is remarkable. There's going to be 3 full carrier groups and all of the assets that come with that in terms of fighter jets, bombers, et cetera. We know at least one submarine, I'm assuming we have more than that, which launched the Tomahawk cruise missiles on Saturday at some of the nuclear facilities.
But don't they have an obligation, the Iranians, the Iranian leadership?
Yeah.
They have an obligation to strike back, Gary. You can't, yeah.
That's what we saw today. And I think we're going to continue to see that, certainly towards Israel, but even quite likely, Mark, towards American assets. And part of this is, and you did a good job of kind of painting this picture before I joined you, when I caught you for a few minutes. This part of this is just the regime in Iran, doing its best to convince its people that they have their back, that is the population's back, and they shouldn't be deposed. Look, the chances of Israel striking a major catastrophic blow with their current missile assets is very remote. And the reason for that is very simple, and that is the level of defensive capabilities in all of the nations surrounding Iran that have been protecting both Israel, and we saw today, U.S. forces, and American capabilities. We've got destroyers on both sides of Iran positioned right nearby that have the capability of bringing down drones, missile strikes, etc. So I think, Mark, there's going to be responses from Iran, but they tend to be pretty overblown in terms of, for domestic consumption, how effective they are.
You know, it's interesting, and as you know, it's not popular, the notion of regime change in Iran. And, you know, Tony, I don't know if you have that Truth Social post, and here it is. Donald Trump says this: it's not politically correct to use the term, quote, regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to, and in quotes, make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? MIGA or MIGA, M-I-G-A, make Iran great again. I mean, you know, the man's a genius. What can I say with that kind of thing? But I'm with the branding. But the regime change is something that even the Bush administration, they were hip deep in regime change. They recoiled from the term. He steers right into it.
Yeah, well, I think the reality is, you know, by all accounts, you know, there are not going to be any American boots on the ground. I mean, I think it's important to make some distinctions between Iraq and Iran. There is absolutely no planning underway that anybody is aware of to actually put troops on the soil of Iran. That's number one. This is all going to be conducted. Whatever retaliation there is from the U.S. and our allies is going to be air-based. There's no question about it. Now, Israelis, they may continue to use their very adept commando forces and their remarkable levels of intelligence to do other kinds of operations, as they already have. But from a U.S. point of view, that's not going to happen. It's going to be standoff, or if it is above Iranian airspace, like we saw this weekend, there's going to be absolute near certainty that there's no capability to affect our assets if they're over Iranian airspace.
I want to turn to the other regime change that is talked about, and that's the regime change that Vilma mentions in this comment. Other than the bombing in Iran, I was so concerned about Vance saying the Guard staying in California until there is a regime change. The regime change in California that this administration wants. Can you speak to that, Gary?
I'm not exactly sure what you mean about the regime change in California.
Well, we're gonna stay here until the socialist Democrats. We're going to liberate this city from the socialist mayor and the Democrats. I wonder if you can. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I really think, Mark, that once the, you know, and by all accounts, the unrest, I mean, you're down there, you can speak to it probably more eloquently than just about anybody at this point, Mark. But I think the reality is, once whatever is going to happen with the majority of the unrest in LA, which now apparently the local law enforcement folks have pretty well under control. And of course, the curfew has been lifted. You know, once this dies down in 30 days, I will be absolutely shocked if those National Guard troops stay down there. I really will. Are they going to stick around for Kamala Harris's potential gubernatorial bid announcement and then her potential election next November? No, that's not going to happen. I mean, so much is going to happen, Mark, between now and November of 26 in California, let alone the nation, let alone internationally, that I hate to say it, but the nature of modern politics is in 60 to 90 days, this won't be anything to most people, politically speaking, unless there's a major increase in the unrest. And the legal case will continue to move its way forward, right? I mean, there's almost certainly going to be a full Ninth Circuit hearing on this, as the state's likely to appeal it. And will it go to Supreme Court? Maybe, but Supreme Court watchers are saying it wouldn't even be able to be taken up until next year.
Yeah, what you're talking about, the last thing that Gary's speaking of, is the ability of the president to come in and Bigfoot mayor, or the governor, more specifically, in putting troops in place. We'll keep this as a record and see whether they are in 90 days here, Gary Dietrich. So I took a lot of static. I got emails because we talked about, last time you visited, the political violence that had affected Minnesota with the legislator assassinated in her home from someone impersonating a police officer, and her husband was killed as well, and two others critically wounded. And we went into a back and forth, and I didn't at the time think it was necessarily noteworthy, but boy, did I get emails that you were both sidesing it when the right is far more prone, and there is far more evidence that the right is involved in a political terrorism, a political violence that you just don't find in those kinds of numbers on the left. I heard January 6th as an example, the pardoning of all of those people, the whipping up into a frenzy, many on the right who militias, etc. And so I wanted to revisit it because I did get so much email on it, and I wanted you to at least kind of answer to it at least in the general.
I'm happy to do that, Mark, and thank you for taking the shots in the meantime, my friend. But look, you know me. Number one, I'm gonna always try to be even-handed and fair wherever that's possible to be. I'm not a bomb thrower, a chair thrower, politically speaking, and I never will be. And that has been a hallmark, as you know, of my work for the last 30 years. However, I want to be really clear, and this is where it gets difficult in the current space that we're in, Mark, because I don't want to say people selectively here, but if you're not strident enough in their direction, and I get this from both sides, right, that somehow you're now an accomplice to the other side if you're not strident enough in their view against that. So let me tick down a couple of things so that I can try to make really clear where I am on this, okay? In absolutely no way, shape, or form, and you know this, Mark, but for your newer audience listeners, people that were with us on KGO, they know this about me. I mean, back to the Ron Owen days, and I mean, just on and on and on. I make no apologies, nor is there any defense for any of the violence on January 6th. We have to just get that one out of the way because that's always job one, right? Secondly, unconscionable any political violence, including from the right. And yes, there are many who have perpetrated that. My point, I think, last week was, look, that it wasn't a person from the right, as far as we know, that tried to assassinate President Trump, right? My point was simply pointing out examples that there have been and are on both sides. If you try to take out a scale and is there more of one or more of the other, I don't really try to get into that, right? I mean, I think there's culpability on both sides, but I want to make unequivocally clear so your audience understands this. And you know this, Mark, I am no apologist for the right, no apologist for any of that and violence or even incendiary language, and that should go without saying.
No, I don't think you're an apologist for the right either, and I like your objectivity, and oftentimes your objectivity is so refreshing, and you talk me off the ledge. I will say this: I think it is manifestly clear that there is way more of a threat of violence and political intimidation from the right. And these are right-wing activists. I'm not saying anybody on the right. It's always a small percentage. But when you look at the Proud Boys and the Three Percenters, et cetera, these are militia groups that exist on the right in numbers that far exceed anything on the left. That's me saying it, and I think it's demonstrably true.
Yeah, well, and I want to make sure that we condemn all of that stuff, right?
Sure.
I want to make unequivocally clear there's no room for that. There's no accommodation for it, and there should be appropriate and swift legal consequences for anybody that engages in that.
So as we finish up, I want to ask you, back to the Iran thing, if you think it possible, and you've just been around politics and you've been around so many different strategies that come out of this world of the Middle East as it relates to politics, might Iran really shut down the Strait of Hormuz? That would be a disastrous situation economically, since, again, 80% of the oil and energy that goes to Asia comes through the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah. Well, Mark, you make an important point, and it really is the most salient point. Okay. You shut down the Strait of Hormuz. That is not going, is it going to affect the United States? Yes. Is it going to affect the United States like it's going to affect others who I'm going to name in just a moment? No. You know what the biggest problem for Iran shutting down the Strait of Hormuz is? It has nothing to do with the United States. It has to do with a country named China. Why is that? Because currently, I just got the most recent numbers last night. Currently, a full 50% of Chinese imported oil is coming from Iran through those States of Hormuz. Okay. And China is far more dependent on imported oil than the United States is. Most people don't know this. We have the capacity, as you know, Mark, to produce domestically that China can't come close to in terms of meeting its actual needs. And then if you throw in our most nearest partners and neighbors, and of course, Trump didn't do us any favors with Mexico and Canada in the last 6 months. But if you add those two in, I mean, we can do without oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Would it send up the price of oil? Yes. But China is the real linchpin in this. And that's why China has come out, even today, and told the leader of Iran, do not shut down the strait. Because it's countries like that, and you, as you pointed out, Mark, the region of Asia more broadly, that would really be the most negatively affected.
And I love that you talk about the linkage and the message that the Chinese are sending, because it is the Chinese that are allied with Iran in many ways. In fact, we were noting earlier that, maybe in the inability to get a nuclear weapon developed on Iranian soil, they just arranged for the delivery of these weapons through China, through Russia, etc. So you need the Chinese if you're the Iranians, and so maybe the pleas of the Chinese, or the entreaties of the Chinese, the requests of the Chinese not to mess with the strait, they might carry the day.
And there's one other important thing, Mark, and that is this Iranian regime, especially today, even more so than 2 weeks ago, is going to be desperately in need of cash, right? I mean, they've got to rebuild all these things, whatever aims they have going forward. And China right now is reportedly purchasing 90% of their exported oil. So, Iran is very, very dependent on their oil exports, and they shut down the strait, and that spigot stops overnight.
I love our conversations. Thank you for being here. You'll always take on the tough questions. I appreciate it week after week. Find Gary on iHeart Radio. Also find him across the CBS television network and here on Mondays. Thanks, pal.
Thank you, Mark.
All right. Gary Dietrich, everyone. And Gary is brought to us each week by Bill Campbell at Remax Gold. If you're relocating into or from Northern California, you want a piece of that Northern California paradise, or you're leaving that Northern California paradise behind, either way, you need a highly respected real estate professional. That man is Bill Campbell, Remax Gold. Call or text Bill 530-448-7474, 530-448-7474. Bill Campbell at Remax Gold.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I know. We've only scratched the surface. Pretty crazy. Thanks, everybody, for weighing in with Gary Dietrich and with everything going on. Probably can get rid of that Bill Campbell banner if somebody's around. I did want to get to a lot of things going on with ICE agents, with deportations, with Brego Garcia. So that's all still to come. And it's not, I know that it is primarily, and I think witheringly clear, I mean, just so brutally clear, that the Latino community is the focus of these detentions and these raids. And it's horrible. For all the reasons that we have stated, the backbone of so much of the American economy when it comes to agriculture, and I would suggest it extends to almost literally every part of the American economy. So healthcare and restaurant services and gardening, landscaping, janitorial service, all the things that have kind of been traditionally thought in that area. But I'd suggest that the extent to which the Latino community as a whole, legal and illegal, that is to say, not in the country with papers, if you will, they're an immense part of the American economy. But they're not the only group being targeted. I have a story that I'll give you in just a few minutes involving a Ukrainian family. I mean, there are examples, as you know, of Afghani families. These are people who aided us in Afghanistan with translations, with intelligence. We promised them that we'd protect them. They're over here too. And now they're being sent back. It's so reckless. It isn't a policy at all. It was a bumper sticker stump speech that carried him into the presidency because of the southern border. I get it. I've made the point over and over to you because I think it's so important not to lose sight of this. There's been a conflation. There's been a pushing together of the southern border problem, the immigration issue, and immigration policy. They're different. They're under the same umbrella of immigration policy, securing the southern border. But securing the southern border and then going through your town and deporting everybody who's brown, that is a policy that's a far cry from anything going on at the border. I mean, showing up at Home Depot and taking all the day workers, that's not the immigration policy that you guys voted for, I don't think. If you're MAGA or believing in, as many people who aren't MAGA believe that we have to stop the bleeding at the southern border. Too many people are coming in, it's uncontrolled, and it has to stop. That has nothing to do with going to a restaurant and deporting the busboys and cooks. It is just completely different, and yet it's being viewed as all the same thing. So I'll get into a little more of that with a story about a Ukrainian family that I just found very emotional, and I think you'll find that it cuts through as well. We'll get to that a little bit later. Agolf says, why hire Tulsi Gabbard to be DNI if you're going to be completely ignoring her? Yeah. Well, when you've already made up the decision and you know what you're going to do, and you're getting intelligence from Benjamin Netanyahu and all that stuff, I think, everybody else, you're looking for an amen corner at that point, right? You're just looking for people to reinforce what you've already decided upon. But I watched an emergency session of the United Nations yesterday. China, Russia, and Pakistan were furious at Trump and said they stand with Iran. Yeah. I think that there are a lot of parts of the world that are angry at Trump right now. The question becomes, how does that stuff all manifest itself? We'll get to that a little bit more. The one thing I wanted you to see before I get to Kim's news is Senator Mark Kelly, who was on one of the Sunday shows. And Mark Kelly is a heroic guy, all right? Mark Kelly went into space as an astronaut. Mark Kelly is a distinguished person of public service.
Wasn't he a fighter pilot? Didn't he serve in the military as well?
I'm pretty sure that he was an aviator in the military. I don't know if he was a fighter pilot or not. If you say he is, then I wouldn't dare challenge you.
I don't know. I'll look it up.
This is Mark Kelly yesterday on the Sunday Show.
A veteran, you're no stranger to the theater of combat. What is your message to the some 40,000 U.S. troops who are stationed in the Middle East, who are right now on heightened alert as Iran warns about a potential counterattack?
Well, I find it interesting that the person without combat experience is often the first person to want to drop a bomb. And that's what we see here. And what we did last night puts those troops, 40,000 of them, at further risk. But we are going to do everything we can to protect them. And we've got a very capable military. We're going to do our best to defend our interests.
Yeah. Mark Kelly flew 39 combat missions during Operation Desert Storm before being selected as and was a naval aviator before being selected as NASA's space shuttle pilot in '96.
Yeah, good stuff. Mark Petrie had the same information or some of it anyway, and thank you for that. So it's wild always to think that these guys who are the chief executives, the Donald Trumps of the world, make these momentous decisions that put us into a war and armed conflict that they would actively avoid if they were citizens. And we know that because of the record. Trump actively avoided service of any kind. I want to say giving Trump the benefit of the doubt when I say, and I've said it before, look, a lot of people were trying to get out of service to Vietnam. It was known to be an awful policy, a horrible thing for everyone, for the Vietnamese, for the Americans. Almost 60,000 lost their lives from this country in combat. Many more lives ruined. Vietnam, it's a disgusting, grotesque perversion of any kind of policy that you would have American troops over there. So everybody knew that. And Trump, like everybody else who had money and was privileged, got out of it or tried to get out of it. I shouldn't say everybody else. You know, John Kerry went over there. He's from a wealthy family. John Kerry was a legit war hero. And they did that swift boat thing on him, if you don't know. I mean, they essentially, I think most of you are aware, they initiated a campaign, a publicity campaign against him. And they took this legit war hero who went to Vietnam, who could have gotten out of it just the way Trump did, or just the way George Bush did. And in a presidential contest with George Bush, made somehow, and this is the magic of PR, I guess, and of a brilliant, diabolically brilliant campaign, made John Kerry, this guy who legit, person of privilege, went to Vietnam, actually served in the theater with bullets flying past him. They made him seem like he was somehow less deserving of credit for military service than George Bush, who barely showed up to the reserve post that he occupied. I think he was a Texas aviation, something to do with the Texas Rangers, barely there. Anyway, the point is, Trump, I used to say, you know, everybody was trying to get out of Vietnam, and he did too. But there were other ways to do it. You could have endeavored in some public service way to have still been part of the American military in a way that you would have been protected from being sent to Vietnam, but you would have gotten credit for being in the military and honoring your service obligation. That was not what Trump did. So, cut to Mark Kelly's remarks. Isn't it interesting that this guy is ready to pull the trigger? You know, this guy who's supposedly a peace candidate, who told you, and by the way, I'm sure you already knew it, but I said it also, and I said it loudly and over and over and over again. The no wars president, everybody says they're a no war president. Everybody. Nixon said, I'm going to end the war in Vietnam. Nobody says, I'll tell you what, we got to get over there, got to put our boys on Marine aircraft and get them over. No one says that. They said, we got to get our boys home. That was the message since the beginning of time. So when Trump said it, you just knew it wasn't true. I mean, it was alongside everything else. I'm going to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. Anyway, I don't mean to make it about Trump, but just in general, you have people who have no experience in this area determining policy. Stan Pollock, CPA, my favorite CPA, says, I'm disappointed in you and most Democrats. The world is safer today. Nobody disputes that, but because it was Trump, everyone says this is bad. Let me respond to this. Stan Pollock, CPA, you could be right. This is not completely wrong. What Stan Pollock is suggesting might be true. If you really did derail the Iran nuclear program, and if you really could change the nature of Iranian leadership to the point that they would engage, that they look around, they see no more relevant Hezbollah, no more relevant Houthi connection, no one home in Syria anymore. These are a handful of their proxies that aren't there. They look around and they go, the Americans are strong, the Israelis are now strong enough because we've been diminished militarily. It's time to play a different game. And that game is to not underwrite terrorism, not be jihadist, literally, when it comes to the destruction of Israel and the elimination of Jews everywhere. If you really think that they can reconstitute themselves as a result of this bold act that resets their program, and again, You don't know that it's reset. You're just taking the word of a president who wants to claim victory. But if it really were reset, it is possible then, if those other things fell into place, that this might be a net positive. I will give you that, Stan Pollock. I think so many things have to fall into place for it to be a net positive that it concerns me that we would just claim it as a net positive. Resetting their program, the Iran nuclear program, and again, don't know that we've actually done it, but just saying if it were to be reset, it can be reconstituted in a handful of years. And it will be reconstituted in a way that will definitely protect it from any kind of mission of the sort we saw over the weekend. So when you talk about what's happening, as I always say, it depends when you walked into the movie. If you just walked into the movie now and you said, look, this guy sent these courageous fighters over and they destroyed all of this nuclear enrichment program, the centrifuge is destroyed, all of it's destroyed because of the magical US of A and their weapons. Okay. But 18 months from now and 2 years from now, what does the movie look like? Are there going to be repercussions from this that affect the kind of one-off terrorism that we've talked about, the sleeper cell terrorism, the potential of messing with the Strait of Hormuz, the effect on the world economy because of that? Will Iran and China and Russia grow closer? I mean, there's a reason Putin didn't get involved in don't do this or whatever it might be. I mean, he could have called his pal Donald Trump and says, I think it's a bad idea for you to have anything to do with this situation in the Middle East or to mess with Iran. He has an interest in America being distracted with that. The more America is involved in Iran, the less America is involved in anything with Ukraine. I just think there are a lot of areas of connective tissue here. And I don't mean, Stan Pollock, and I really appreciate you throwing in, I don't mean to neglect the possible narratives that could be positive. But I do mean to say at this instant, I think it's hard to say whether it's a positive. And it's clearly destabilizing. So you could say, well, Iran's destabilizing all the time. They undermine a constant destabilizing from Houthi rebels in Yemen and other proxies. I mean, I can't argue with that. That's true. But it was an incredibly bold act that I'd suggest might be immensely destabilizing to the region. But you may see, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, you may see a new vision for the region where you had the Saudis and you had the Qataris and you had the UAE, etc., somehow warming to the notion that America, with its commerce, Trump with his resorts, his view toward bringing more and more commerce and money and business opportunities to this world, normalizing, if you will, a lot of the Middle East into America and the West. You may see that as something that is now being given an even broader landscape to grow because this one big bad wolf of Iran has been so hobbled. That may be. I'd say one last thing. It would mean more if there were a place for Palestinians to reside in the Middle East safely and with a self-determinative aspect to your politics that you'd find there. Now, that's a part of another conversation. All I'm trying to say is there's a lot of connective tissue here. So I think that conversation still has to continue. Anyway, those are some of the broad strokes.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I am going to quickly, yeah, I've already read this, but thank you. The Vilma thing was right on. I gave it to Gary Dietrich as a question. I'm Mark Petrie with a $12 super check. Come on, with a big shout out to Mark Petrie.
Big shout out.
By the way, Kim, our June swoon on Thursday night looks big, big, big. Looks really great.
Oh, good.
In fact, I'll tell you some breaking news. There it is, the June swoon. Look at all of these. June swoon, that's the graphic that Kim made, everybody. Very, very beautiful. June swoon on Thursday. There's still a couple of good seats up front if you want to grab them. Okay. Here's how you do it, and then I'll tell you the breaking news around June swoon. It's our virtual meetup. It's this Thursday, 6:30 Pacific time is when it starts for 2 swooning hours. 6:30 to 8:30 Pacific. That is a 9:30 to 11:30 in my gorgeous East Coast. What's up, East Coast? Man, it is hot as Hades on the East Coast. Incredibly hot. 2 hours of swooning with special guests. I'll get to one of them in a moment. And how to join. As I say, there's still a couple of good seats up front. $50 donation to PayPal. You'll find PayPal links under all our videos. Also on our website, themarkthompsonshow.com. Note June swoon with your donation, then RSVP to mtsmeetup@gmail.com. Say, hey, I just did it. The June swoon donation or whatever it is, and then just let me know that you're on board there. mtsmeetup@gmail.com, and then you are in, locked up. So Thursday night, it'll be nighttime here in the East Coast, here on the West Coast, I should say, and on the East Coast. And on the East Coast, I think, is America's favorite weatherman, Spencer Christian.
Yay.
So apparently we had corresponded with Spencer, and he couldn't make it because he's at a dinner, and, Spencer's always at some dinner. And I texted him. I didn't know that he had already said no. So I said, hey, I'm, just to let you know, I'm at this dinner. I already told Kim, so I won't be able to make it. And I said, oh, that's no problem, but thank you for considering it. We love to exploit your celebrity anytime we can or whatever. And then he said, you know what? I'm going to duck out of the dinner and join you for 10 minutes.
Oh, that's nice.
That was kind of cool. I really love that. That's our pal Spencer. So he'll be joining, and
Jim Avila is going to come by.
I love it. Jim Avila, the author of this.
There's always been in this country 30 to 35% idiots.
That's Jim Avila. He's
Michael
a former
Snyder.
ABC News correspondent. He was a national correspondent for ABC, senior correspondent there. He's been in theaters of war. He's been to the Middle East. He's reported from all of these places that make news. And Jim will join us. That's really good news. Michael Snyder.
Says he can't imagine not dropping by. Michael Snyder says, bring your questions. He wants to talk about TV shows and streaming and all kinds of stuff. And Jefferson Graham will be in Cincinnati, but he's also going to pop in for a few minutes. So pretty cool. Yeah.
Isn't that cool? Very, very cool. So we have it. David Katz says that he will join. Yeah, I believe so, Gordon. Yeah, he's going to try to make it too. So there's a lot going on. We'll ask David K. Johnston as well. We have the call app, but we'll sort of follow up and see.
Yeah.
The reality is we don't need any of those people. We're going to have a great time. It's a really fun thing. I mean, I'm glad they're coming. Don't get me wrong. It's better with them, but it's really great. Our first our first virtual hangouts, they were pretty great, as I recall. It was a few years ago, but it was just us kids, and we had a really great time. So smash the like button if you would.
Smash it with your iron rod.
And subscribe to the show if you haven't. Please hit the notification bell, and you'll know whenever we drop a new video. We're dropping new videos, and we don't inundate you with stuff, but on the weekend. And do make sure that your notification bell is there. One of the things that's happening with YouTube is they're taking off the notification bells that we're on. They're throttling us in terms of audience. A lot of stuff's happening, so we really need you to make sure you're subscribed and you have the notification bell on, and both those things are free. So Kim's news, and we continue, and we get into a little bit of where the immigration situation sits and the ICE raids that continue around L.A. and around the entire country. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Reports say the United States is confirming now that Iran attacked a U.S. airbase in Qatar. There's not yet been an official statement from the White House or the Pentagon. The U.S. does confirm there does not appear to be casualties from this attack against the Al Udeid airbase. Iranian state TV says the country launched the same number of missiles against the U.S. base that the United States launched against its nuclear facilities. Military analysts say Iran's attack against the United States airbase may be an effort to save face with its people. Retired senior CIA official Mark Polymeropoulos tells NBC News the Iranian attack looks like it was designed as an off-map to perhaps end this conflict. There are approximately 10,000 troops at this airbase located about 190 miles from the Iranian border.
Well, it definitely was designed to, in some way, mollify the public, take care of them so that the public wouldn't say, hey, you let these guys bomb our country and you don't do anything. So they had to do something. But that's an interesting and intriguing notion that lives alongside the supercell or, the sleeper cell stuff. So it's either there's sleeper cells everywhere, the Strait of Hormuz may be closed, it might be mined, who knows what they're going to do and where they might strike, or it's, you know what? That was just a performative thing. They bombed Qatar, and now everything's over. And they're just happy it's all over. So it's one of those two. All right.
That seems too good to be true. The president is meeting with his national security team following weekend airstrikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. On his Truth Social platform, Trump called the damage monumental and raised the possibility of regime change in Iran. Trump said if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change?
This is one of the, Tony's got it up now, one of the posts that Trump made in relation to this. The sites that we hit in Iran were totally destroyed, he said, and everyone knows it. Only the fake news would say anything different in order to try and demean as much as possible. And even they say they were, quote, pretty well destroyed. Working especially hard on this falsehood is Allison Cooper of Fake News CNN. Dumb Brian L. Roberts, chairman of Concast, he calls it. Johnny Carl of ABC Fake News. And always the losers of, again, Concast's NBC Fake News. It never ends with the sleazebags in the media. And that's why their ratings are at a, in quotes, all-time low. Zero credibility. Wow. That seems so out of character for him.
So nice that he cares so much about broadcast reports. Like, why don't you just focus on facts and not worry about what people are reporting? Why don't you just focus on the job?
All he cares about, all he cares about is the message, is the propaganda. That's all that matters. Tell them it was a success. Tell them you're the greatest. Tell them it's the greatest.
But don't we need evidence to suggest that it's a success? Like, I don't know, intelligence or satellite photos or whatever it may be.
The evidence is that I've seen it, and I'm telling you, it was such a success, he would say.
My bad.
The evidence is that the failures are because of DEI. I mean, is there evidence for that? What do you mean evidence? I just told you. DEI is the issue. I mean, there is a reason that dovetails with every policy out of the administration. And the reason is because I said it does. And so this hugely successful military strike meets every criteria of a successful military strike. Why? Well, don't you need to go in there and actually, or don't we need some kind of follow-up in it? No, I just told you, you don't need anything. You can go in and do it, but it's only gonna tell you what I'm just telling you. Most amazing one single act of military strength flex in history.
Wouldn't it be nice if it was a success? If we didn't have a world where Iran had nukes, that'd be great, right?
It'd be great if nobody had nukes.
Thank you. The head of NATO is defending the U.S. airstrikes against Iran. Speaking ahead of tomorrow's NATO summit at The Hague in the Netherlands, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said the attacks did not violate international law. He said NATO's position has been that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. To immigration, Kilmar Abrego Garcia is set to be released from custody pending his trial on human smuggling charges. A federal judge made the order yesterday, scheduling a hearing for Wednesday to discuss the conditions of his release. The judge made it clear in her order she does not believe Garcia is a flight risk, but did acknowledge that ICE is likely to detain him if he is released from custody. A new super PAC is aiming to unseat Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie. The Republican lawmaker has sparked pushback from President Trump after his sharp criticism of U.S. strikes against Iran, as well as his opposition to the president's big, beautiful bill. According to Trump's co-campaign manager, MAGA KY was formed for the specific purpose of firing Thomas Massie. Massie was first elected in 2012. He's announced plans to run for re-election next year, despite Trump's operation reportedly being in talks with potential challengers. This is that whole thing where they're going to primary people, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So
it's real. If you step out of the MAGA world, they come after you. We'll see how this. I mean, sadly,
if you step out of line. I mean, he could be supporting of Trump in several ways, but if you say one thing against him,
I mean, this is the
You're out.
point. You've got to drop in and say there was an imminent threat, and he had to do it. You know, it's they don't really tolerate. Might be the word. They don't really tolerate anybody stepping out of line at all.
no. Police say a security guard shot and killed a gunman at a church in Wayne, Michigan on Sunday morning. Police responded to reports of an active shooter at Cross Point Community Church in suburban Detroit. Officers arrived at the scene, found the suspect dead, and one of the people involved in the taking down of the suspect wounded in the leg. This is crazy. This is a footage of inside the church as they hear what's going on outside, and families running for cover inside this church on Sunday in Michigan. You can see the person on the stage that was telling everyone, get in the back, get in the back. So frightening. There's the front of this church where the suspect apparently drove toward the church, got out, and then was seen with a bunch of weapons, and they had security guards at the church who took him down. So there is one person still missing following a deadly boat accident on Lake Tahoe. 7 of the 10 people on board were killed when the 27-foot vessel capsized near D.L. Bliss State Park on Saturday. Coast Guard officials say 2 others were hospitalized with injuries. The cause of this accident remains under investigation. High waves have been reported in the area at the time of this deadly accident. Now, this is a picture of boats that were slamming together in the harbor, one of the harbors around Lake Tahoe. There's a picture of the capsized boat. Weird weather in Lake Tahoe over the weekend. It snowed. I mean, it's late June. It was snowing. The waves were up to 8 feet on Lake Tahoe in June.
It was like a biblical plague at Lake Tahoe this weekend. It was, there was hail and high wind. There were hailstones falling down on Lake Tahoe. There was a high wind, rain, snow, and I mean real snow.
Yeah.
And the winds produced this immense action on the lake that you're talking about, and it destroyed a lot of these boats. It was insane.
The boats were slamming together. Some of them
we were gonna
Yeah.
lead with the story just to give you a sense of what was happening, because there's something different than, but the intense information out of the Middle East and the base in Qatar being hit. Kind of look, here it is. Tony's showing you now, if you're watching on YouTube, some of this destruction and some of that action on the lake. It's incredible. And you can see the snow on the ground.
In June. Weird. They say the waves and the wind on the lake just kind of came out of nowhere.
It's extraordinary. I haven't looked at the actual meteorological conditions at all to see what sort of was at play there, but wow. Really something. Show me that again, Tony. Can you hit play on that real quick? This is on the lake. Just unreal.
It's Lake Tahoe.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, those boats just slamming together. I have also video of a friend that happened to be at a cabin in Lake Tahoe. It says, oh, I have to take out, it was video, but she's got pictures of snow falling, in the middle of June. It looks like a major winter storm. Amazing. Yeah. Elsewhere, police in Santa Monica are still investigating the shooting of 2 teens as they rode in a Waymo car. This happened on Sunday night. Santa Monica police say the teens were stopped in this driverless car near the intersection of 2nd Street and Broadway when someone walked up and fired several shots into the car, wounding both teenagers. Police believe the shooting was targeted, stemming from an earlier altercation. Both victims are hospitalized with non-life-threatening injuries, and police looking for the suspect. But makes you wonder if you're not kind of a sitting duck in the back of a Waymo car. There's nothing you can do, right? You're
That's
just
right. No,
there.
That's super scary. Yeah, super scary.
Guess what? Dolly Parton is headed to Las Vegas. Yeah.
I love it.
The country music icon announcing her Dolly live in Las Vegas mini residency on Monday, set to take place December 4th through the 13th at Caesars Palace. Parton has not regularly toured in almost a decade and hasn't had an extended run in Vegas in 32 years. Tickets for her mini Vegas residency go on sale on Wednesday. That's going to be a popular one. Are you going?
Well, it's my birthday month. It's Courtney's birthday month. We love Dolly. Saw her at the Hollywood Bowl. I'd like to go to Dollywood myself. Love Dolly Parton. Who doesn't? I mean, everybody. She's insanely talented, incredibly prolific as a songwriter, performer. Unreal.
And
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah. Oklahoma City planning to honor the NBA champion Thunder. The city will host the 2025 Champions Parade downtown tomorrow. They'll do it at 10:30 a.m. their local time. The Thunder beat the Indiana Pacers 103-91 in Game 7 of the NBA Finals at home on Sunday. Very exciting.
Yeah.
And
the
just
Pacers
in case,
lost their star during the game. Once that happened, it was all over. But not to say the Thunder wouldn't have won, but just saying it was really not even close after that.
where would you say the most desirable city to live in is in the United States?
Oh, that's a great question. And by the way, it's a question we always ask ourselves here in my house.
Most desirable city in the United States to live, Honolulu.
Oh, yes, of course. Well, yeah, gotta be.
Not among the top 20 in the world, though. The rankings come from the Economic Intelligence Unit's Global Livability Index. They're based on stability, healthcare, culture and environment, education and infrastructure. Honolulu tops the United States, ranking for the third straight year. Atlanta ranks second. Pittsburgh, Seattle, and Washington, D.C. round out the top 5 in the United States. Worldwide, Honolulu comes in at number 23 for the second year in a row. Copenhagen, Denmark, tops the global list, followed by Vienna, Austria, Zurich, Switzerland, tied for second. There you go.
I could see Zurich for sure, man. Those Swiss cities, Zurich, Lucerne, they're insanely great. But, you know, Chad is right. Carmel, I think Carmel's pretty livable, man. That's a pretty terrific place to live. Don't you agree?
Yeah, Carmel's beautiful.
I'm seeing a lot of, Jeanette says Toledo, Ohio. Calvin says San Diego. St. Joseph, Michigan? Is there? I don't know St. Joseph. I know St. Joseph. No, I don't know. Randy knows more than I do.
I'm unaware of that city, but yeah.
Yeah, me too. But
Carmel isn't it? I think it's true that Carmel they don't have regular addresses, like numbered addresses in that community. Yeah. They do it. They do things a little differently there. But Honolulu, city of my birth, by the way.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah. This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Oh, the tea, the vanilla tea, mouth waters thinking about it right now. The coffee, Mark says it's all right too, you know.
Best coffee I've ever had. In fact, I'm having it right here. It's a piece of heaven, my friends. Heaven.
all organic from women-owned farms, and you get a special Mark Thompson Show exclusive discount. It's 10% off, enough to really pay for that shipping. It's Mark T, no spaces. Put it in at the code at checkout and get your discount. And check it out. Try the coffee, try the tea. There's some great mango summer tea that they have, like for sun tea. So amazing. Really good. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Joe Box and Little Anthony.
Mo Black's brother, Fat Andy.
There's a reason that this place is fun.
I'm not gonna cry! I'm not gonna cry! Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
My bad. I'm sorry.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
We've never seen anything like it before.
Have you ever seen anything like this? There is nothing in our history that quite compares to this.
Nobody has ever put something like this together that I've ever seen.
There's never been anything like this.
Why are you yelling?
Good day, sir.
Seriously, what the?
Right on, everybody. Thanks for being here. By the way, there was a passing of note here, and I thought it. Let me just quickly follow up. Randy says the southwest corner of Michigan is where that place is, kind of across the lake from Chicago, is where that St. Joseph is. St. Joseph, Missouri. That's the one I thought of. Yeah, Colleen, exactly. But I don't know exactly where St. Joseph is. Anyway, interesting. Our audience is so smart.
Well, that's pretty.
That's really pretty.
Yeah.
No wonder. Yeah.
That's St. Joseph's, Michigan, Tony?
I don't know.
What is that?
According to Google.
Okay. That's what Google said it looks like.
That's the one.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah. Pretty good. Nice. Who is Linda Hamilton or Lynn Hamilton died? John Slade says somebody died.
Oh.
Yeah.
We'll check.
In time for a death update. Yeah. All right. I'm going to wait for that to come in while you Google it. But I did want to tell you about, speaking of a passing away. I see, because I mentioned that somebody, yeah. Let me tell you about a guy they called, he was an undercover agent, so I think they called him a lot of things. Louis Diaz. He busted a drug kingpin, was a famous, unbelievably effective undercover agent posing as a mobster. And this mobster in his mob operation was dealing drugs, laundering cash to topple this other mobster who was a real mobster named Nicky Barnes. I was just reading about it over the weekend. I thought I'd just share it because it's so odd. But Mr. Untouchable was this guy, Nicky Barnes. He was a narcotics kingpin from Harlem in New York. And he was on the cover of New York Times, their magazine, in June of 1977. That's him. Imagine being a mobster. You are a drug dealer. You are a money launderer. And you're so powerful that you can pose for a photo shoot and be on the cover of New York Times' magazine. That is real. He was so brimming with bravado that when he was told by the editors of the magazine that his police mugshot would run with the profile, he still agreed to pose for a formal, more flattering picture. That's the reason he did it, because he didn't want people just to see his mugshot.
Sure.
But he was ultimately taken down. And he was taken down thanks in large part to this undercover investigative work of Luis Diaz. He was an agent for the DEA. He was a former boxer from Brooklyn, and he worked to get that guy. It was a huge, huge story. And he posed as a part-time hitman, the cousin of a mob wannabe, in this yellow Cadillac, this garish yellow Cadillac, as it's described. His stakeouts and tape conversations were instrumental in the federal prosecution of this guy Barnes, Nicky Barnes. And one dealer who he was dealing with suspected that Diaz was a government informant and held a .45 caliber handgun to his head. And Diaz said, if you have any reservations about who I am, you might as well pull the trigger now. And the dealer was convinced by Diaz in that moment and uncocked the gun.
Wow.
He was instrumental in sabotaging a Colombian drug cartel, destroying heroin labs in Bolivia. After being transferred to LA, he parlayed the Hollywood contacts he cultivated while there into a side career as an actor. He was 79 years old, and he passes away from complications of Parkinson's disease. But a remarkable story, and I've just kind of given you the broad strokes, but he was a legit boxer. There he is with Quentin Tarantino, and the book he wrote, Dancing with the Devil. I got to pick that up. I'm going to pick that up today.
I bought 2 copies of The Great American Road Trip by Sarah Kendzior.
Yeah, sure.
Because I know 2 people taking road trips this summer, and I thought it would be perfect. So
that is a wonderful book.
Yeah.
And we had her on and talking about it, and I want to have her on again in the next couple of weeks if we can do it. But all of her work is that way. But the reason I love that book, it's her most recent one, is because she does take a road trip. It's the real thing. She's taking a road trip with her kids and with her family. And she is contextualizing everything. She's putting everything into historical context and explains to us, the reader, the significance of these places. You know, these just signposts on the side of the road, or these places that have rich histories. Some of them are troubling. Some of them are encouraging. Some of them, you know, really soothe your soul, and some of them make your soul ache. She is a brilliant writer and an investigative journalist. We got to get her back. And that's called Great American Road Trip. And her book, I think prior to that, is called They Knew. And it's all about the way in which those in power, Democrats in power, helped enable. It wasn't just Democrats, but they include, she does, Democrats, enabled the rise of Trump and MIGA and everything we've seen after. So I'm glad you picked those books up. Yeah, really, really cool. The other thing I want to mention that's not related to Iran, and it's also not related to the immigration situation, which I'll get into in a second, and some of the other problems that we are dealing with at the moment. I wanted to mention a big shout out to Lauren Sanchez and Jeff Bezos.
Big shout out.
They shrug off the protests, Kim.
Whose wedding gets protested?
They have a foam party. See if you can Google some of the pictures, Tommy, and share with the boys and girls the foam party that they had on the $500 million super yacht that Bezos owns. This is all to kick off their opulent wedding week festivities, and they have all their celebrity friends there, and they are going to be descending on Venice this week. The nuptials are set for the 27th, just 4 anxiety-filled days away. They're being greeted by anti-capitalist demonstrators, for those who wanted to know what the demonstration is about. He's 61. She is, anybody? No, how old?
42.
No. Anybody? How old is Lawrence Sanchez. No Googling. I know the answer. I'll share it with you in a second. He is 61, and she is, what do you want to guess? How old is Lawrence Sanchez? The soon-to-be wife of Jeff Bezos. Melifidian says 22. Tony, I just said don't tell him. What's wrong with you? You've got a disorder. Stop the music for a second. Stop it. You've got a problem, Tony.
Hold on, Tony. No.
I was getting it ready.
You were getting it ready. Put it on the screen.
I didn't mean to. Sorry.
I just think I
stand corrected.
All right. I don't know. I guess.
Well, it's hard to tell that she's 55 because it's plastic surgery keeps her young forever.
Well, you know what, Kim? I sense a little mockery,
Well, I'm trying to
and
be
I don't
nice
like
about
that.
it.
Yeah. She is lovely. I've always liked Lauren Sanchez. It's been a while. We did a show together called That's So Hollywood. I always liked her. She was always definitely leading with a kind of oozing sexuality. I'll say that. She always had that going, and she was always always delightful. So I again, I've got nothing great. Plastic surgery, whatever it is. I'll tell you what, I'm the one who needs plastic surgery. I'm ready to go. Wheel me in.
Have you ever seen those videos of people who somehow get their lips in a bottle and they kind of like use the suction on the bottle to like plump up their lips? She has that I've been sucking on a bottle look with her
she can have the enhanced lips, which I will call them instead of the pejorative way in which you sort of framed it. She does have a little bit of that. I will say this, Kim, and I'll say this to all the boys and girls. The lips thing, I don't understand it. I don't understand why so many women are going that way. And is that society? Is that something that they've seen that seems sexy or something? I don't get the lips thing.
I don't either.
I've never gotten it. Don't touch your lips. But sometimes her lips look more enhanced than others. Look, for all I know, she's changed and she's no longer the lovely person that I knew. But the person I knew was terrific. And so I wish her well. The couple partied off the island of Cres in Croatia. And this is their final pit stop before arriving in Italy for their long-awaited wedding. And the world will be a better place when the two of them are man and wife.
Oh, the foam party looks fun.
It was a foam party. If you're watching on YouTube, they did it all on their yacht. And Lauren's son, Evan, is 19 years old. Man, he's got a good life set up for him, doesn't he? I only hope that Evan can find a job somewhere.
What?
Penny says she looks plastic.
Yeah.
I know, and isn't that great? I love that. I just love that look. Yeah.
Well, it's why when you ask, I mean, it's pertinent. It's why when you ask, how old is she? Who knows?
Right. Exactly. Tony Gonzalez's baby mama. Exactly. Right. Yeah. He was another one who seemed very nice. Anyway, you think his next job, Evan's job, her son is as an Amazon delivery driver? I don't think so. But maybe within the Amazon universe, something, huh? Anyway, that's the latest on. And Tony, did you get all the pictures of the? I'm glad you got them all up there. If you want to see the foam party, Tony has put all the pictures up along with Lauren Sanchez's age. So I think she looks great for 55. Yeah, right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, if I can get for a moment. By the way, I wanted to mention one thing that I did leave out because this was, and I thought I was going to come up with Gary Dietrich, but Donald Trump and his team, they did contact the top congressional Republicans before the Iranian nuclear facilities were struck in that military mission over the weekend. But the top Democrats, not told. And that is just not the way you do business in this government. Now, government has changed, and it would appear as though that is the way they do business now. But I wanted to be clear that only half of the world of legislators in Washington, those who are supposed to approve military endeavors of this sort, only half were informed. And again, the leadership was informed. And I would say one thing also, just while I'm mentioning it, I'm seeing a lot of, he can't do it, it's illegal to do this without congressional approval. As a practical matter, that congressional approval just isn't part of the process anymore. Obama did the same thing. He ran bombing missions without approval. Clinton as well. So it happens, Democrats and Republicans. It would be great if they honored the system as set up, but the executive does have the power to order these kinds of missions and to see them executed. So now, I wanted to get to just a couple of things when it comes to immigration. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I saw a piece over the weekend that I just wanted to give you a window on. You know, my position on these sweeping immigration raids is that they're out of control. They are not part of the mandate that Trump won the presidency on. They are not part of the border control that so many Americans felt was really without any kind of reasonable policy. That is to say, so many immigrants were flowing in from the southern border, not just Latinos, but so many different people with so many different backgrounds in a completely unregulated way moving to the southern border. That's not what the immigration policy is about anymore, right? The immigration policy has nothing to do with the southern border. I mean, they've sealed the southern border. Great. You can peacock about that all you want. But what the hell are you doing swinging by Home Depot and scooping up a bunch of people who are hardworking? Some guy who's mowing a lawn in an American suburb, you pick him up and you throw him into an ice van and you leave the mower still running on the grass. You go into a restaurant in Washington, D.C. before it's even open, a high-end restaurant. You go in with 9 ICE agents. There are more ICE agents in that restaurant than there were employees. This militarized posse that goes into all of these neighborhoods, it's out of control. And it's taking people who have been here 20, 30, 40, 50 years with children, with grandchildren, who've paid taxes all this time. And you're brutally rounding them up and detaining them until they are deported. And then the private prison system licking its chops as they build more facilities to house all of these immigrants who are going to be detained and then deported. This isn't the policy that propelled Donald Trump to the presidency. It isn't. There may be some of you that support this, but it is a wanton, reckless immigration policy. It has no regard for who it's scooping up. Violent criminals? Are you kidding? Violent criminals at Home Depot, at Lowe's? Violent criminals in the strawberry fields?
I saw a video over the weekend of a not an ICE raid, but kind of a people purporting that maybe they were ICE agents. We're not sure who they really were because they didn't show their faces. They didn't have badges, but they went to a car wash and were trying to round people up at a car wash. It's really scary looking.
Do you have that video? I think it was shot by a bystander, kind of courageously shot, because they'll pick you up if you shoot video. These guys, you understand, these guys are untethered. It is outrageous that you can show up without any ID, without any warrant, without any markings, without your face exposed, and you can grab people brutally and throw them into an unmarked van. That is not America. It is not acceptable. There has to be pushback on this. There has to be legislative pushback and public pushback. Here's the video.
The woman in the video is alleging that these are bounty hunters. And I don't know if this is the case, but she's alleging that bounty hunters are sent out to round people up. I don't know if they're doing scout work for ICE or what's happening with that.
Go ahead, Tony. Oh, can you show it or not?
I am staying out of the way, but it is also my right to record.
Make it a little bigger or not? No?
I agree. So this is fucking kidnap. Because you guys just show up and you do not identify yourself, so they don't have to go. They don't have to go with you guys. You identify yourselves? Oh, yeah, I just identified. I need to see the badge. Oh, no, my badge is right here. No, that is not your badge. It is. It's not your badge. You know what? I do have a little bit of education, and I know that is not your badge.
So these guys stop for a second. They show up with some badge they got on Amazon, and you think that is going to get this done? It's outrageous. Bounty hunters? I mean, this is what we were talking about. It's the militarized handfuls of those who want to get in on the act. It's outrageous. They want to get in on the act. That's who these people are. It's a flex. This isn't Department of Homeland Security. These aren't federal officers, and they weren't deputized in any official way. This is truly something you should be really angry about. It is scary. It just doesn't happen here. Who is to say who these guys are? And by the way, many instances of people being abducted by guys who have no markings whatsoever, as I said, faces covered, and then people are abducted this way, and as it turns out, they weren't officials of any kind. They weren't part of Homeland Security or bounty hunters or deputized or anything. Google it. It's happening. So this is of enormous concern, but it's not just car washes, Home Depot, Lowe's, kitchens, strawberry fields, where they're finding all of these violent criminals and getting rid of this toxic brew that is ruining society. This is horrifying what's happening, but it's not just there. Listen to this. In deep red Iowa, Ukrainians who fled Ukraine and found home in a community in Iowa that opened its arms. This is America. Yeah. It's in a red state, man. It's not red and blue. The best of America is our warmth, is our welcoming, is the way in which we do take in strangers, other ethnicities, people from different backgrounds, people that are fleeing violence. These Ukrainians, they go to Iowa, and they got into Iowa on a temporary humanitarian program that was in relation to everything going on with hostilities in Ukraine. So when Russia invaded Ukraine, a lot of Americans rallied behind the Ukrainians. It was a moment of solidarity in this country, and Ukrainian flags went up everywhere, and the Ukrainian refugees were welcomed. And as noted here, in a corner of the Midwest that had sheltered Southeast Asian refugees just a half century before, there was a family determined to see their community become part of the effort to protect Ukrainians fleeing the war. This is a part of a piece that profiles this Ukrainian family, and I'll butcher their name, but the Hegemonovies and their big fluffy white cat, they all fled Ukraine. A Turkish Angora mix named Barzik. And business and community leaders across eastern Iowa and western Illinois came together to help the family and other Ukrainian arrivals find housing, find jobs. The woman is a college professor. She started a nonprofit called Iowa Nice that helped more than 75 refugees resettle in DeWitt, Iowa. That's a Republican place. It's not even close. Only 5,000 people live there, and it's all Republicans for the most part.
And they thought, these Ukrainians, that they would be welcome here.
Exactly. And they were welcome in that moment and in the months that followed. But then Trump returned to the White House, signed an executive order on his first day in office, terminating legal protections for hundreds of thousands of immigrants who'd entered the United States through the Biden-era humanitarian programs. 3 days later, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services suspend the processing of petitions and renewals for Uniting for Ukraine. That was the Biden-era program that allowed 240,000 Ukrainians to live and work lawfully in the United States. Even after a federal judge ordered the government to continue the Uniting for Ukraine program, a lot of Ukrainians have seen their deportation protections, driver's licenses, and work permits expire with no indication of when or whether even they would be reinstated. And so, after the Supreme Court allowed the government to terminate, for now, a similar program for 500,000 Cubans and Haitians and Nicaraguans and Venezuelans, there is concern in this Ukrainian community that stepped up immigration enforcement efforts are going to include them. And the protections that they had under the Biden administration, they're gone. The woman who set up this program says, and she's an American, we're forcing people to either become illegal or to become a burden on the community. And that doesn't feel good for these families, and it doesn't feel good for the community, and it makes absolutely no sense. And I have to say, having read this profile, and I'm just kind of summarizing, the robust way in which they become part of the community and they become part of the economy, and they had a background in construction, so they work construction and eventually set up their own contracting business, and one becomes a teacher. I mean, there's just so much in the way of good that this community does. This is a community of refugees. And again, the notion that these people are going to be summarily deported is scary, and it's just un-American. It's off-brand for us. And that's why I'm moved by it. I really am. I think it is one of the great problems of our time, that we are trying to dry clean this country of those who make some of the most substantial contributions, some of those with the richest histories, war refugees, those who have fled violence, those who have legitimate claims to asylum. You can change the asylum laws. You know, I backed some kind of reimagining of an immigration system that was updated. I mean, some of that was done in the immigration bill that was derailed by the GOP, but the reality is that the immigration judges, 10,000 of them that were going to be hired so that we could process all of these people who had claims to asylum, but they were going to be evaluated. Like, maybe they have legit claims, maybe they don't. That has all been derailed because of that bill being derailed by Trump and high-profile Republicans who wanted to use the immigration issue as a way to regain power. And it worked. They did regain power. But what's happening now is a brutality and an ignorance that is, and a recklessness that is un-American. And it's horrifying. Were it just the Latinos, it would be horrifying. It doesn't change a thing that it goes beyond the Latinos. It goes to the Ukrainians. It goes for anyone who has been fleeing here to America for a legitimate claim of asylum. But to see it include all of these different people, many of whom, the overwhelming majority of whom, are productive members of American society and culture, I find it loathsome. It's stomach-turning. And it should bother everyone. So I think these are dark times in that regard. We'll see.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I do want to mention a bit of good news for those of you who struggle with diabetes. If you have severe diabetes, there is potentially a cure. This happened in a small trial of a new drug. This is a stem cell-based infusion. And once they got this stem cell-based infusion, insulin was no longer required.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's for the most intense kind of diabetes. So that's type 1 diabetes, and it was a very small group. 10 out of 12 people, though, were cured. 10 patients a year later no longer needed insulin.
Wow.
The other 2 patients needed a much lower dose than they had formerly. This is an experimental treatment. If it's of interest to you and you want to read more about it, you should Google it. It's made by a company called Vertex, Vertex, Vertex Pharmaceuticals of Boston, and it involves stem cells that scientists use to turn into pancreatic islet cells, which regulate blood glucose levels. I know nothing about this, but apparently the new cells were infused and reached the liver where they took up residence. And this study was just presented Friday evening at the annual meeting of the American Diabetes Association and published online. And it's trailblazing work, they say. Being free of insulin is life-changing, said one of the doctors. And maybe this will do it. They didn't discuss cost of this drug. That's generally the case before the FDA approves it. But it might truly be remarkable. I mean, it might really be, to use the phrase, a game changer. So, might be worth looking into.
Yeah.
You know, the stem cell stuff is something that is super intriguing. A good friend of mine, she and her husband they went to I think they have a substantial amount of money. They went and got stem cells that are from their own body, and then they use it, that's re-injected. Somebody else can explain this. I'll ask Dr. Daniel about it next time he comes through, maybe next week. But she's had great luck, and there's certain kinds of...
Was she ill?
Physical maladies. No, this is the point I was going to say. She's got certain, I guess, stuff that has to do with like joint pain and this kind of thing that it was particularly helpful with. And she and her husband both have achieved success with it. Now it's expensive though. Yeah.
When my kids were born, you can save the cord blood and have it stored at a facility. And I kind of looked at it as an insurance policy. And so I did it for both of my kids.
Yeah. Only the rich will be able to afford it, said Linda. Yeah, I'm sure that's true. But I mean, isn't that the way a lot of things start, though, I would say, with treatments that only the rich can afford, but ultimately maybe it becomes more accessible to others once the technology gets out there. We talk about big pharma, and I make this point occasionally. The thing that's really awful about big pharma isn't that they shove pharmacological stuff down your throat. I mean, you might find that to be an issue also, but it's the cost. Big pharma does a lot of research. We underwrite a lot of that research, as you know, and this is before the Trump administration comes in. I don't know what the hell's coming on now. I mean, I don't know if they sell all the microscopes on eBay and they just get rid of everything and they turn NIH into a big Airbnb. I don't know what's going on with RFK Jr. and that whole world. I mean, but I do know that historically we have underwritten, that is, we as taxpayers have underwritten a lot of the research that goes into these breakthrough pharmaceuticals. And the problem is that they become incredibly expensive. It's not that they don't work. Many of them do work. Now, some of them don't, but some of these greatest breakthroughs, in history, they are pharmacological breakthroughs. The problem is with big pharma that we allow them to exist in this country and apply withering sticker prices on everything so that we're paying huge, huge markups for living in the United States of America, where the rest of the world is offered many of these treatments at wild discounts. That's the problem with big pharma. It's a political problem. It's a market problem. It's not that everything they do in all their research is, it's big pharma, it comes out of big pharma. Yeah, whatever, dude. It's a treatment for cancer. It's a treatment for any number of things. The one treatment that has been, I think, fraudulently bandied about as a treatment based on everything I've read is the Alzheimer's treatment. We're all desperate for Alzheimer's treatments, those that really work. And the reality is, what I'm reading is 30 years of research goes into this drug that doesn't even look like it actually works. But apart from that, there are not a lot of pharmacological duds out there. Most of them do something. Now, the side effects, et cetera, but the real issue with big pharma is money. So, anyway, there is anything else I need to do, Kim, before I just seeing how late it is. Sorry.
Debbie sends $5 and says Stephen Miller loves this and supports it, talking about the whole deportation thing, right?
Yeah, it's so sad. It's absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is really his policy that we're seeing play out on in American cities and on American streets. Mercenaries for hire, Mark, Chaplain Fred says, 1,000 to 2,000 per person that they detain. Just about anyone can be a Trump supporter that can be part of these masked thugs. Just about anyone who can be a Trump supporter that can be part of these masked. Okay, anyone wanting to make money if they're heartless. Yeah, I didn't know that there's actually a $1,000 to $2,000 bounty. Maybe we can check that, but that's, of course, disturbing. Again, it's disturbing enough that these were actual federal employees, but they're not. They're not. This is, Proud Boys 2.0. Welcome to Trump's America, where empathy is forbidden, says Harry. I mean, it sure does seem heartless, Let's see. Cassandra says this. Pharma greed continues to kill 10,000 a year of people with curable, preventable disease. In other words, tuberculosis. I mean, it is true that if you can't afford it, you or your children or your family may not get the life-saving medications that you need. It's just true. D. Elliott says, I've been saying the bounty stuff all show, Mark.
Why are you yelling?
Thank you, D. Elliott. Yeah. Year supply of Eliquis, a blood thinner, is $900 in Canada and $7,000 in the United States. Crazy. Wild. Well, I'd like to stay. Alas, we must go. We'll watch the situation with the Middle East for you. Tomorrow, David K. Johnston joins, and we will comment on those things going on in the Middle East and beyond. Also, something pretty huge happened in the military, and I'll talk about that with David K. Johnston tomorrow.
You know who else is on tomorrow?
Who else?
Jessica Denson.
Jessica Denson, the star of questioning the last election and beyond. We'll talk to her about plans for this election. So, wow, what a show tomorrow. Anything more, Kim? Oh, you've got your after party, of course.
Yeah, the after party coming in.
Right on, baby. After Party Live over on the After Party Live channel.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Tony, thank you. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tony.
And Kim, you too. Until tomorrow, everyone, thank you. Bye-bye.